Hello fans of all ages, Ryan Morik back here with you on the day where probably nobody gets elected into the Baseball Hall of Fame. Now, this is always one of my favorite days of the year just because it's awesome to celebrate the history of, in my opinion, the best sport in the world. It's my favorite sport. It's my only tattoo that I got, just a bunch of baseball seams on my arm. But every year you can't help but think about all of the negative aspects that come with the Baseball Hall of Fame. Just because that there are so many rules that are so outdated and need to be changed, and then you have everything going on with PED users, and then even in this year's ballot we see things going on with Curt Schilling and Omar Vizquel, and there's just a lot to dive into, so let's go right into it. First of all, my first issue with the Baseball Hall of Fame is the fact that you are only allowed 10 votes, and I say only loosely because every year that I've seen a ballot where I've really been following this day, and I'd say that's probably within the last 7 to 8 years, I've never seen 10 Hall of Famers on one ballot. I don't think ever. And this year, I personally only see 5, and I'll give those out in a little bit. But this year, I only see 5. Last year, I think I only saw maybe 6 or 7. I've never seen 10. And if you think that there are 10 Hall of Famers on this ballot, then fine. That's obviously your prerogative. But I feel like every year, we always hear the argument about 5%. And if you're not getting 5% on a ballot, then you're off the ballot forever. And that forces people to not vote for Derek Jeter, but make sure that they get a vote in for a guy like J.J. Putz in last year's case. This year, we're seeing LaTroy Hawkins get votes, and Mark Buehrle get votes, and Tim Hudson get votes. There are going to be people out there who don't vote for Curt Schilling. And again, I'll get into Curt Schilling in a little bit because he's an interesting case. But wasn't it a miracle that Mariano Rivera was unanimous? Someone actually did not vote for Derek Jeter. Hank Aaron wasn't unanimous. I mean, we can go down the list about people who were not unanimous. It's everyone except Mariano Rivera. And that turned into a whole other issue where people were saying, well, if Mickey Mantle wasn't unanimous, if Hank Aaron wasn't unanimous, if Babe Ruth wasn't unanimous, how come Ken Griffey Jr. should be unanimous? If Tom Seaver wasn't unanimous, how come I should vote for, in a couple years it'll be Ichiro, in a couple years it'll be Albert Pujols eventually. So that became a new mindset for so many voters. If the best of the best were never unanimous, and this guy on the ballot wasn't as good as he was, why should I vote for him? And that created another issue with the Hall of Fame. An issue that I thought was going to be gone after Mariano. Nope. Derek Jeter, 1 vote shy. And of course, we don't know who that one guy is. And it's his right to stay anonymous, but I feel like if you're afraid to have an opinion, you shouldn't be in the business. If you're going to sit here and not vote for Derek Jeter, I need an explanation why. And if you're going to tell me, well, hey, he's obviously a Hall of Famer, but I saw 11 guys on the ballot, and one of the guys on the ballot was struggling to get 5%. I knew Jeter was going to get in. He didn't need my help. I wanted this guy's help, or I wanted to help this guy rather. Then I'll disagree with it, but at least I have an answer. And it's funny that I say this because I remember a couple of years ago where the Hall of Fame was about to make the rule where your vote had to be made out to the public. And it's funny because I actually disagreed with that at the time. Now I don't really know where I lean, but what I do like about the Hall of Fame is that these votes are at least genuine. And it does piss me off that so many people are afraid of their opinions, are afraid to not be able to explain themselves. But I don't want people to vote for Derek Jeter or Mariano Rivera in years past because they feel like they have to. Weird, I know, but I at least want the votes to be genuine. But at the same time, maybe that would have solved a lot of problems in last year's ballot and other past year's ballots. But going back to the main focal point of all of this, 10 votes maximum? Why can't we just decide if someone is a Hall of Famer, yes or no? And I understand that people can change their minds. Personally, I changed my mind about Curt Schilling pretty recently, but in 99.9% of cases, you know if someone's a Hall of Famer or not, and you're not going to change your mind. So why can't the Hall of Fame just be, here's the ballot of everyone who is able to be elected. You get 75% of the vote, you're in. You don't, you're out. No maximum votes, no minimum votes. Everyone on, 75% is the cutoff. Why is that such a difficult concept? Because we've seen this 10-vote rule mess up so many ballots. I personally don't think Fred McGriff is a Hall of Famer, but he's at least borderline, and he was on the come up, and he was a product of very crowded ballots. And look at all of the guys who never got 5%. None of these guys are Hall of Famers. But Lance Berkman should have at least gotten more consideration. Bernie Williams, Roy Oswalt, these guys deserved a little bit more consideration. Again, they're not Hall of Famers, but they deserve to be on the ballot for more than 1 year. Even Johan Santana, guy's a 2-time Cy Young Award winner. 5% off the ballot, gone. Now, Dan Haren and LaTroy Hawkins and Aramis Ramirez in this year's case, they don't deserve other consideration. They're not Hall of Famers. They never were. I don't even think you can pick out one single year of them and say if that were a 20-year career, that would be a Hall of Famer. They were good players. Small hall guys, big hall guys, whatever. I would guess I would lean on the side of small hall because I've never seen 10 people on one ballot, but I just feel like that 10-person maximum has ruined so many aspects of voting. And now obviously we live in a world where every single ballot is going to be filled with someone who took performance-enhancing drugs. This is Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens' 9th year on the ballot. Next year we're going to see Alex Rodriguez in what ironically will be Bonds and Clemens' final years on the ballot. We'll still have Manny Ramirez, we'll still have Sammy Sosa, we'll still have Gary Sheffield, and this is always a slippery slope for everyone. I have a couple of rules when it comes to performance-enhancing drugs, honestly. Number one, if you were ever suspended, you would not get my vote. So A-Rod, who has grown to become one of my favorite people in sports and was one of my favorite players growing up, I would not vote for him. Two, you better be better than the rest of the pack by far. So with that criteria, I would not vote Sammy Sosa. I think his career was strictly home runs that were a byproduct of performance-enhancing drugs. Same thing goes for a guy like Mark McGwire. Strictly a power hitter, in my opinion. Without steroids, he probably does not have those same numbers at all. And the same thing goes for Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens. Without steroids, these guys probably don't have their same numbers. But on top of that, these guys were better, much better, than everyone else in that time period who was taking performance-enhancing drugs. Take it all the guys that are on that Mitchell report and have gotten suspended. Chuck Knobloch was on the Mitchell report. Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, yeah, they probably took them, but they were so much better than everybody else, and they never got suspended from a test. And hell, Roger Clemens went to Congress and was found not guilty of lying on oath. So take that for what you will, but Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens were just so much better than everyone else. And Barry Bonds was on a Hall of Fame path before he started taking steroids. Same thing with Roger Clemens. Now the question bears, why did they have to do it? They didn't have to do it. It was stupid of them. It got them nice contracts, and I'm sure that they probably don't regret them. They got Roger Clemens a couple of rings. I'm sure deep down, they probably don't regret it. Take a look at a guy like Robinson Cano. He's getting suspended for a year without pay, but he's still going to make $220 million throughout the duration of this contract. So I don't think that you can sit there and tell Barry Bonds and Clemens wouldn't tell you that they regret taking these if it's true. And it probably is, because they were on their way to a Hall of Fame career. But in my personal opinion, I feel like Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens changed the game. Another argument, which I don't really take into consideration that much because, again, I would leave off Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire in any ballots, and I don't even think McGwire is on the ballot anymore. But Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire and Barry Bonds basically revamped baseball. Did we remember that documentary, The 30 for 30, Long Gone Summer? Baseball was dying. And then it was a hush-hush secret throughout MLB about steroids. And Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire, what they did, they brought back every single baseball fan because they hit a combined 140 home runs that year. And then Barry Bonds rewrote the history books. And that's the thing. Barry Bonds rewrote the history books. He wasn't putting up borderline Hall of Fame numbers on steroids. He was putting up numbers that we have never seen before, ever. The guy in 2004 was intentionally walked 120 times. If that were his own person, he would have ranked 3rd in walks in MLB. So yes, Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, they would get my vote. They're probably the only two guys that I can think of that would get my vote, but they fit my own personal criteria. And if you have an issue with it, that's the thing about steroids. There's no right or wrong answer here. If you would never vote for a steroid guy, I would never criticize you for that because they cheated. If you feel like Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens are the only people you would vote for, but not Sosa and McGwire, and basically in my case, I would not argue with you. If you think performance matters and the numbers matter no matter what, and you would vote for Sosa and McGwire and Rafael Palmeiro a few years ago, your prerogative. Fine. I'm not going to argue with you. Everyone has their own criteria in terms of PEDs. There's no right or wrong answer. It's a very difficult subject. But I ask myself, how many people who are not voting for Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens are going to vote for David Ortiz in a couple of years? Because David Ortiz apparently tested positive. He was never suspended, but he did test positive. But David Ortiz is such a character in baseball. One of the most beloved players throughout baseball and writers and the media. Bartolo Colon, who will not be a Hall of Famer, never put up Hall of Fame numbers aside from his Cy Young season. He did have a nice brief prime, but his numbers don't scream out Hall of Famer. People are gonna vote for him because he's a nice guy and because he was a fun character in baseball. And that's another point. The integrity and the character of the person. And we see a lot of people vote for, we've seen it this year, but Troy Hawkins is getting votes because he was a nice guy. Dan Herron might get a vote because he was a nice guy. Curt Schilling, on the other hand, who is a surefire Hall of Famer, will not get votes. And if you know me, you would probably know that I hate Curt Schilling. I hate everything he's about. I hate everything he stands for. We disagree about almost everything politically, but in my personal opinion, character and integrity of who you are, it should not really matter. It's important, but I think on the criteria of the Hall of Fame voting rules, that's dead last, honestly. I feel like we should not forget who was good and who was bad because of someone's opinions. And I say opinions loosely because calling for the lynching of journalists and having Nazi supremacist memorabilia all over your house is far from an opinion. That's kind of more of you just being a psychopath. But Curt Schilling was a damn good baseball player. And something else that's been bothering me about this whole Curt Schilling thing, a lot of writers are asking to rescind their votes. Apparently that was the rumor. It's probably too late because today's the day where the ballots get announced, but people wanted to rescind their votes as if it's breaking news that Curt Schilling is a Trump supporter and he's alt-right, and he tweeted out his support for the Capitol riots and people were surprised. This guy openly wants journalists to be killed, but now you're surprised that he supports the Capitol riots? So I also feel like the media is trying to do their jobs and trying to be the nice guy here, but we knew who Curt Schilling was a long time ago. And speaking of character flaws, Omar Vizquel, domestic violence allegations now, and his voting has dropped. Personally, Omar Vizquel is not a Hall of Famer. Stop voting for him. He never was. Congrats on being a good fielder. He didn't really do anything else. And his fielding is kind of overrated in the first place. But anyway, people are not voting for Omar Vizquel because of this domestic violence dispute. And I do ask myself this. Let's say that someone was on the ballot and within those 5 years, he killed his wife, got sent to jail for life. Then yeah, I would question if I were to vote for him. Maybe your character is kind of like steroids, where there's a criteria. And I know that's kind of a harsh thing to say, but killing someone is not the same as being a Trump supporter or being someone on the alt-right or supporting the Capitol riots. Again, if you know me, you know where I lean on all of that. But come on. Let's be a little realistic here and have some common sense. Well, now that I got all of my issues about the Hall of Fame out of the way, I'm giving you my ballot that doesn't matter because I am not a Hall of Fame voter. And I say this as I'm wearing my Barry Bonds jersey. Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Todd Helton, Billy Wagner, Curt Schilling. Those 5, that's it. Those are my 5 guys. I look at a guy and I say, is he a Hall of Famer? And if I have to think about it, it's a no. That's just my opinion. People have criteria when it comes to stats and everything like that. I see a guy's name and I know if they are a Hall of Famer or not. And it's also tough for me to say because I don't remember watching Jeff Kent and Scott Rowland a lot. I didn't watch them every day. When they retired, I was 10 years old and I was a Yankee fan. So I didn't watch a lot of those guys. But Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens I watched all the time, obviously. Billy Wagner at least had a stint in New York. Barry Bonds, everyone knew who Barry Bonds was. And Todd Helton retired only 6-7 years. He retired the same year as Derek Jeter. So I remember watching Todd Helton for a little while. So nowadays, and even in a couple of years, ballots are going to be a lot more fun to look at because I'm going to remember everyone and how they played. And I'm finally getting to that point now. But anyway, here's why my ballot is the ballot. You heard my criteria with Bonds and Clemens. We can get that out of the way. Todd Helton, yes, he benefited from Coors Field immensely. You look at his splits and they're insanely different. But I want everyone to take a look at his numbers on the road. I believe he had a 287 average, an 855 OPS. I did some research and I put it all on Baseball Reference. And Todd Helton played in 2,247 career games. So what I wanted to see was those numbers magnified into his career total. So he played about 1,150 games on the road. I wanted to multiply that into 2,247. And it turned out that he would have 288 home runs, 1,111 RBI. So I wanted to put all those numbers in Baseball Reference, see who has that criteria in 2,247 games, and 25 people in the history of baseball have those numbers. 17 of them are Hall of Famers. 3 of them are Barry Bonds, Gary Sheffield, and I thought the other one was Manny Ramirez. One of them was Miguel Cabrera, and the other 4 were borderline Hall of Famers. So I said to myself, okay, if Todd Helton played on the road, or away from Coors Field, I should say, his entire career, maybe his numbers stay borderline and he's not a Hall of Famer. But what he did at home at Coors Field, and I understand that everyone benefits from Coors Field, but it's not like Nolan Arenado where he's a great player at home and then actually bad on the road. Todd Helton was a borderline Hall of Famer on the road and one of the best players of all time at home. And I think that is a Hall of Famer. I think think he did the job when it had to be done at Coors Field. His numbers at Coors Field are Barry Bonds-like, and that to me is a Hall of Famer. We can disagree. You can be a huge, he benefited from Coors Field. I'll never vote for anyone who played in Colorado. Fine. I thought Larry Walker got the short end of the stick for 10 years, but I'm glad to see Todd Helton's candidacy is rising. Billy Wagner, come on. The guy was one of the most dominant relievers ever. Highest K per nine in MLB history. Lower ERA than Mariano Rivera. I don't get why he gets penalized for being a closer. He was dominant in that role. He's one of the best closers of all time. In my opinion, he's probably better than Trevor Hoffman. Trevor Hoffman was a compiler who got to 600 saves because he pitched for 35 years. And yeah, Billy Wagner doesn't have a great postseason resume, but even in his final year, Billy Wagner had like a 1.7 ERA. Billy Wagner was dominant from start to finish. And we don't see that a lot in closers. Billy Wagner is a Hall of Famer. Curt Schilling, one of the best postseason pitchers of all time. If he wasn't teammates with Randy Johnson, he would have had 5 Cy Young Awards. He finished in second, 3-4 years in a row? Curt Schilling, his regular season numbers don't scream out this guy's a Hall of Famer, but he does have 3,000 strikeouts. His postseason numbers are amazing, much better than his regular season numbers. He basically carried 2 teams to World Series. And that postseason boost gets him my vote. Even with everything that's going on in the Capitol riots and what he supports, he was too good. And I'm not going to let his opinions, even though I disagree with them immensely, I'm not going to let that affect what would be my vote. I appreciate you all for watching this. Thanks for listening to my rambling about the Hall of Fame, even though it doesn't even matter because I am not a voter. But I do think I speak for a lot of people in my opinions. And hey, maybe someone in baseball in the Hall of Fame watches this and then they realize how much of a crappy scenario that they have. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the vote. Hopefully somebody gets in tonight, and I'll see you guys next time.